Good afternoon, everyone. Um, I am here to talk about the mobile port of a video game I have worked on. The name of this game is Raji, an Ancient Epic. And for those who don't know about it, Raji is an action-adventure game. It's set in ancient India. And you play as Raji, a young circus performer whose world it's turned upside down when her younger brother Golu is kidnapped by demons as a part of an ongoing war between gods and demons. So the game, it takes inspiration from Indian and Balinese culture and the myths and lore that the team and us, we have grown up with living in India. So Raji, it has been developed with Unreal Engine 4, and it was initially released on the Nintendo Switch in August of 2020. And after that, in October of the same year, it eventually made to all of the major platforms, PlayStation, Xbox One, and the PC platforms. And in April of this year, it got released on, it got available on the Play Store and Apple App Store as a part of Netflix. So even during the development of Raji and after its release, Raji has gotten a lot of love and appreciation by the many players that have played it. And it has garnered several accolades from industry giants like the Game Awards, BAFTA, and GDC. So before I go further, I want to play the release trailer of the mobile version of the game, just to give everyone an idea about how it looks and feels on the mobile platform.
Raji, awake, my child.
It is so much weight to put on the shoulders of a mortal. Is this one strong enough?
Time will tell.
She has no serenity. Her heart rules her head.
There is fire in her. Yes, it must be tempered. But without that fire, she would have already given up. True bravery is only ever found where fear is strongest.
I have never doubted her courage, but I hope she will be in time. This shall play out as it should.
War is my domain. You are now no stranger to it. Know that I am proud, for your heart is already as strong as can be.
So, yeah, the footage that you saw over here, that was captured on an iPhone 12. And since that, it has undergone a couple of more iterations for lighting and shadows. So that looks better in the final release. And yeah, as some of you may know, Raji, it's the maiden title for Nodding Heads Games. We are a small team of passionate developers. We are based out of Pune, India. And I am Paras Chaudhary. I am the lead programmer in the team. I handle almost everything tech-related in the studio. So the first question we asked ourselves was, why should we port a PC game to mobile? Because I mean, if you really want a good port of a PC game on mobile, it's a really daunting task because it needs to be enjoyable on the new, smaller touchscreen devices, the new hardware, and not be just a functional port. So, and considering the size of our team, it was going to be an even more challenging road ahead. So to answer this question as to why we should bring Raji to mobile, we reverted to our initial vision of creating Raji in the first place. And that vision was to put India on the game dev map. What I mean by that is we wanted to announce to the world that quality video games with global recognition and global acclaim can come out of India. And now, of course, I mean, creating a quality product is just one part of the puzzle. We also wanted our game to be played by as many people as possible. And that's one of the bigger reasons why we took the decision of working towards a mobile port. So the objectives of the port, what we wanted out of the port, they were quite clear from the beginning. Just touched upon those right now as well. That the visuals of Raji, first of all, they have been its USP. They have met with critical acclaim, and we wanted to maintain that visual quality, the quality that we had achieved in the PC and console versions of the game. And in no way did we want to release a mobile version that would compromise on the visuals. And secondly, as I mentioned, that we wanted to deliver a game that's not just a direct port, but it's a version that is enjoyable on smaller touchscreen devices as well. So after we figured out what we wanted to achieve, it was about how to go about it. So the first task, I mean, it sounds simple enough, but a team with no mobile dev experience, it was challenging like right from the beginning. So it involved setting up the dev environment, getting all the necessary hardware, setting up the SDKs. This was followed by playing big scoped 3D mobile games, mostly for references, for UI and input controls. And this was followed by a bit of redesign. I mean, we tested the game after we got the first initial build of Raji running on the mobile. We realized that it needed a bit of redesign. We had to change the pacing of the levels, make it slightly easier for touchscreen devices. And the controls and inputs had to be reworked, mostly the multi-button inputs, where you're holding multiple buttons on a gamepad. It's not as intuitive on touchscreen devices, so that part had to be redesigned. The UI also went through some major rework as well, and it's not just the menu that was made more readable, but some of our in-game systems also, the UI of our in-game systems also went through some major redesign. So what you see over here, it is the favor of the gods system that we call in the game. And on the left, you see the PC version, and the right, a much more cleaner version that we used for the mobile. And yeah, the graphics options also were redesigned. On PC, you have a lot of conventional options, more granularity. We kind of combined them into 3 presets of high, medium, and low, and had an option for frame limiting as well. So there were some platform-specific tasks, also platform-specific issues that we faced. They were mostly, they would come up mostly in the form of visual glitches. Like in this particular example, it's a simple example where on the Android version, you could see that the floor texture, it looks completely fine. But on iOS, it was looking pixelated. So this is just one of the many, many things. I mean, one small example of the many, many platform-specific issues, mostly related to rendering and shading. Sometimes a shader does not work the same way on Metal as it does on OpenGL. So those kind of things we had to deal with. And then there were some tasks like QA, bug reporting, and compatibility testing, which were taken care of by Netflix, and we had a healthy back and forth with them. So the performance optimization process, it took a lot of effort. It took exceptional effort from the team because, as I mentioned earlier, that since we wanted to maintain the visual quality bar that had been set by the PC and console versions, we could not just go around butchering the visual quality just to attain a certain frame rate number. So to start off, we picked the Nintendo Switch build, since that was a version that was already optimized for a lower spec hardware. And then without getting too much into the details of the set regime of optimization that we go through, I mean, that's going to be like a talk in itself. But I'll just touch upon the points, what we all did, which included downscaling all the textures from 2K to 1K or even 512. But yeah, we did leave some of the textures to 2K, specifically the ones that were of significance to the story. I'll get to that later. And the VFX were downscaled, their shaders were simplified, particle counts was reduced, bits of code were reworked to reduce CPU usage. And the base LOD of all the meshes, they were reduced. But then again, we did that only to an extent where the silhouette of a mesh would not get distorted, and it would stay true to the visuals that we had in the PC console versions. We also had to implement software occlusion culling. Regular frustum culling does not work on mobile, so software occlusion culling is something you have to implement. And lastly, we cut down on dynamic lights heavily and only used dynamic lights where it was aesthetically demanding. Apart from the basic optimization checklist, I want to mention a few specific instances. Again, simple examples that helped us gain some performance. One of them was using flipbooks instead of particle emitters. So over here, you can see a basic candle-like flame effect. On the left-hand side, it's done through a particle emitter, and on the right, it's done through a flipbook, which is taking fraction of the performance cost. Apart from that, basic general good practices to turn off text, but not just on actors, but on the components that are not being used as well, because this is something we figured out during profiling. Some of the specific components, they were taking more CPU milliseconds than required, and we would just turn them off and on using the set tick enabled function. It was as simple as that. Then one thing that we used, which gave us a lot of headache, was the cable component in Unreal Engine. We use this cable component as the string on the giant bow puzzle in the game. And this cable component, the values that it has, it can get out of hand really quickly. So we had to dial back a lot of values for the mobile build. And the result of all of this optimization was that the live build that is there, that's live on the stores, it's giving a smooth gameplay experience on medium to high-end Android and iOS devices. And it's still playable on low-end Android devices with low graphics settings and capped at 30 FPS. So this brings me to share some screenshots with you all. The screenshots are, the comparison is done between the PC build with ray tracing enabled and the mobile build. So my idea was to give you a comparison between the builds from the highest spec to the lowest spec, just to see how much variance there is. So this is the first scene in the game, and you can see that the shadows are much more softer on the static meshes in the mobile versions, but the overall lighting is still very much maintained. We also had to let go of detailed reflections, but we were able to retain dynamic shadows on the main characters and the NPCs. The dynamic shadows were retained, but we were only able to retain it for the directional light. For stationary lights, we had to turn them off, the ones that we used for cave lighting. So on the PC screenshot, you can see a nice hard shadow underneath Raji, and on iOS and Android, it's absent. And this is one of the things that I was talking about earlier, where we did not compromise on the texture quality in certain areas. So this is one of the mandala puzzles in the game, and since we are conveying part of the story through this puzzle, we absolutely made sure that the texture quality of these puzzles is not compromised. I mean, we would trade off somewhere else, but the areas of significance for story and for visual storytelling, that would not be compromised. This is one of the screenshots of combat. Raji is in combat. So here I just want to emphasize on the readability of the character, which is, again, maintained across the different builds, the different versions, and it's very much similar. So the points that I have talked about so far, they are more or less part of regular development. Now, I want to mention some of the challenges and the tricky bits that caught us off guard during development. So the first was Google Play Store guidelines, which, it's 2 GB limit, and that's yeah, was a bit of a head scratcher for us. To give you a context, I'll let you know what the size for the PC build was and how we got it down to 2 GBs. So what got reduced was the cinematics and audio. They were highly compressed, but again, we could only go to such an extent to not compromise on the quality because that was our cornerstone. And the baked light maps, the resolution of that, that is something that we took advantage of for the smaller screen. We reduced the resolution of the light maps by quite a lot with very negligible difference on when compared from a PC screen to a smaller touchscreen device. So to give you a context of the build sizes, the enhanced edition of Raji, it was 6 GBs on Steam and on consoles, 3.7 on the Switch, and we somehow got under 2 GBs yeah, for iOS and Android. Then it was Google Play Asset Delivery System linked to the previous thing. Google Play Asset Delivery System, it's something that Google has if your game is, I think, above 150 MBs. I'm not sure. Please don't quote me on that. It basically creates asset packs, and it gets downloaded on demand when the game is downloaded for the very first time. So your initial download is slightly lighter. So the challenge that we faced here was that the implementation and documentation for Google Play Asset Delivery System with Unreal Engine, it's very limited out of the box. And I would like to give a shout out to this one plugin that we use from Marketplace, which is called Easy Google Pad. And that saved us a lot of time to get into implementing some of the missing features of Google Pad in Unreal Engine 4. And the next challenge, and probably the biggest, was implementing the Netflix SDK. So the Netflix SDK that was provided to us, it was in the form of native API. And to get it to work with Unreal Engine, we had to wrap the native code of the SDK into an engine plugin. So to create this engine plugin, we had to learn Unreal plugin language. And this eventually led us to understand the basics of the native languages for Android and iOS, which is Java and Objective-C, respectively. And this is something we had absolutely not anticipated when we first started working on the mobile version of the game. So to elaborate on this a little bit, in Unreal, if you want to create a build for Windows platform, the process is quite straightforward. But if you have to create a build if you have to package it for mobile platforms, before the final build is created, the engine first auto-creates an intermediate project. So it's an Android Studio project for Android, which is in Java or Kotlin, and it's an Objective-C project, intermediate project for iOS. And these, in turn, they create the final packages. And if you're using any plugin that has to be used in your Android or iOS build as well, there is something called Unreal Plugin Language. And this Unreal Plugin Language, it creates like a bridge between the C++ code of the engine and the native code of Android Studio or Xcode. And to create this bridge, you need to have a rudimentary understanding of Java and Objective-C. So another challenge that we faced was Raji's skirt, or her ghagra. And her skirt, her ghagra, it's an important part of her character, what we created. And it's an iconic piece of clothing worn by women in many parts of the Indian subcontinent. And the problem that we were facing here was that the technology that we had used, Apex Cloth, that was not available for mobile platforms, for Android and iOS through Unreal. So the first option that we discussed was, OK, let's take the native code from NVIDIA, who are the developers of Apex, and let's implement it ourselves. So this option had to be discarded since Unreal had already deprecated the support for Apex when they introduced Chaos. And NVIDIA themselves, they had never implemented Apex for iOS. So theoretically, if you would have gone forward with this, this fix would have worked only for Android. The other option that we considered was to add new bones to Raji's rig around her skirt. so that we can animate the cloth manually by hand. And this was also discarded since it would have been an excruciating process to reanimate over 250 animations of the main characters by hand. So finally, we settled on using the Encloth tool in Maya and baking the resulting clothing simulation into keyframe animations. So this also required a little bit of back and forth to get the values just right. But once the pipeline was set, it reduced a lot of manual work, because once the pipeline was set and when we were happy with the simulation that we were seeing, we would just re-import all the animations and be done with it. And if we would see any, we would go through each and every animation, and if we would see glitches in individual animations, we would revisit them on a per instance basis. So here you can see the comparison between Apex Cloth on the very left, which is working on PC and console versions, and on the very right, it's the baked Encloth. So Encloth is also not 100% foolproof. You can see a little bit of clipping around her knees, but that's only if you zoom in a lot. And these were the issues that were negligible on the smallest touchscreen devices, and it worked wonders for performance as well, because Apex is quite CPU intensive. So again, the challenges that I have talked about, they did push us to our limits, but there were some factors that made it even more tricky. I have summed it up broadly into 3 things, which is manpower, technology, and time. So by manpower, what do I mean? I mean that Raji, an ancient epic, it was made by a very small team. At that time, it was just 10 people working full-time and a few of us working as freelancers. And for almost the entirety of the development, it was these many people in the studio. And when we decided to move towards towards working on a mobile port, it was, I think, 4 of us who moved towards working on a mobile port. And since we did not have any prior experience of working with native mobile development, it made implementing the native SDK of Netflix even more tricky, and it took us much longer time than anticipated. We also faced some difficulties with the stability of the engine itself, because Raji, it was made with Unreal 4.26.2, and parts of the engine source, they were outdated owing to updates to iOS version, new Android versions coming in, updates to Google Play libraries, updates to Xcode itself, Mac OS updates, Xcode updates, and your project will just stop working. There would be changes in platform guidelines, which we had to make sure that we update the engine manually. And the extremely limited documentation on Unreal plugin language also did not help. We had to scavenge through a lot of existing projects that people had put up, where they had used Unreal plugin language. So it was just like scavenging here and there just to get a hint of what needs to be done. And lastly, it's the time, or rather the timing of events. So while we were working on the mobile port, it wasn't like we were crunched out of time, but rather there were multiple projects being worked upon in the studio for the same game, basically for different versions of the game. There was work being done parallelly. And to elaborate on this and to close my presentation, I just want to take you through a timeline of from the initial release of Raji, which was in October 2020, to April 2023, when the mobile version of the game was released. So in October 2020, we released Raji on all major platforms. August, Nintendo Switch came out, and in October, we had it running on PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam. Then the team took a much-needed break after the release on all major consoles. And the moment we got back, we started talking about the possibility of a mobile port because of the things I mentioned about the objectives and the fact that we had seen that a lot of people were talking about or were asking about if we have plans for a mobile port. So immediately after, we started working on our first mobile build, and in 6 months, we had a first build ready with most of the things working from start till end. There were visual glitches, there were performance issues, but at least we could test the game end to end on the mobile devices. But this was also the time when we were working with Xbox to get the game out on Game Pass. So these things were going on parallelly. I was working on Game Pass, and the other programmer, Deepam, along with our tech artist, Jalay, they were working on the mobile build. Then after the Game Pass build was wrapped up, we worked on the enhanced edition of the game for almost a year. This was a free update to the PC and console versions, and it included features like ray tracing, DLSS, FSR. We improved a lot of combat based on the feedbacks that we got, the reviews that we got from the initial release of the game. Added localization, many more localization languages. And the good part of this work was that a lot of these features went into the mobile version as well. And while we were wrapping up the development side of the enhanced edition, that was the time when we started working on the SDK. And on and off, it took us about 10 months, like right from learning the native implementation, the native integration into Unreal for the SDK code. And while this was going on, we were also working on the physical edition of the game for Nintendo Switch. And then, yeah, after almost 2 years, probably 26 months, 26 months after we first started talking about the possibility of the mobile version, we released the game on App Store and Google Play Store via Netflix. This brings me to the end. Thank you so much. So if there are any questions, I would love to take them. Yeah.
So I actually wanted to know, like, what was the process of getting the end cloth animation?
The what?
The end cloth animation from Maya to the game engine itself. Was it like a point cache thing, or like how was the whole process? I just wanted to know,
Yeah, so I have a high-level idea of it. I was part of the process, and this was done by Nate, our technical animator. So what he did was, at least from what I remember from the demo that he showed us, when he simulated Encloth itself, or there was some process that auto-created procedural bones on the skirt itself, and then we would just discard the bones and bake it into keyframe animations. So the bones that were being created, they were being auto-created as part of the process. We could see it, but we would not export it as part of the skeleton. So that's one thing that I remember out of it. And then once it's baked out into the keyframe animation, I think, then it's just about re-importing the animations.
Okay, so so the animations that you got into the engine, what was being keyframed? Was it the as in like the vertices? Those were keyframed.
I think it was the vertices, because one difference that Raji's mesh got was she got a new what's the term for it? Her skirt, it became like a new material ID. So all the information of that animation, it got transmitted to those vertices. So if you want a little more elaboration, I think, one of our animators is at the booth. I think he'll have a better idea. I know the high-level process of how we went about it. And if you want any guidance with this process, like any low-level information, you can definitely drop by, and I think he'll be happy to help you.
All right. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I've heard you mention that you guys were working with the older engines, older versions of Unreal Engine like 4.2, 6.2, right? So even we've worked with a lot of older versions of engines. There are a lot of difficulties with it. I'm asking, what tips and tricks would you give us, or like how would you tell other people to work with older versions of the engine where there isn't a lot of tutorials, there isn't a lot of documentation, like even Reddit and forums, and they don't exactly help a lot. So what would you suggest? What would you do for other developers if they are out there trying to use the older version of
Well,
the engine? Thank you so much.
I wish there was something motivational that I could tell you about that, but yeah, I mean, working with older versions, it does come with its own perils. Um, we were lucky enough to find, because 4.26, I mean, 4.26, it's still not that old, but considering how rapidly things update in the mobile, in the mobile ecosystem, that was the area where we faced the most challenges. So we did find solutions on the forums. We had to dig a lot. I mean, that's something that's the only thing that helped us out. I mean, I wish there was some good news that I could tell you, but we did face a lot of difficulties, especially with, if I talk about mobile specifically, any updates to the minimum API level that Google wants you to implement, that's something that can turn into a bit of a nightmare. So even right now, we are working on updating the mobile version of the game. Right now, Google has updated their minimum API requirement to 33, I think. And the moment you change that, the build won't compile. So we had to go through the engine source code manually. I think there's some bug with WebView, sorry, it's not a bug. The functions have deprecated. So we had to manually find those things in the engine. So one thing that I can recommend you is to see, or rather check the errors very carefully. And if you don't find anything on the forums, that is the only place where you will find things. And what you can do is say, I got a problem with WebView in Android. So maybe there's no direct answer for why is my Unreal build not compiling with WebView. But when I looked for WebView and API level 33, I found a lot of things where people with native development, they were facing this. So all I had to do was I checked where the problem was happening, and then I would go into the engine source and see where the Epic people have implemented this particular thing in the engine source. And there, through a bit of hit and trial, here and there, that's the way to go about it.
Thank you so much.
It was an amazing talk. So I wanted to ask about, were there any instances where you felt the engine couldn't do something and had to extend the engine or like change the mechanics because the engine was lacking in something?
Can you please repeat?
So like, were there instances where you had to extend the engine or change the game mechanics because the engine was lacking in something that you wanted?
No, not really. I mean, when we design the mechanics, we expect the engine to fully be equipped to, I mean, for us to realize that mechanic. And Unreal, I don't think it was lacking anywhere on that sort. Whatever problems or whatever challenges that we have faced, it's like the technology, not the capability of the engine. So yeah, we did not have to change any particular mechanic. Of course, UX and controls and input based on playtests, for sure we did modify that for touchscreen devices, but none of the mechanics as such were maintained because, again, we wanted to have a like-for-like feeling for what the PC and console versions had for mobile.
Also, how often did you have to like modify the engine source, like you were just mentioning?
Well, modifying whenever it came to dealing with the Android bit or iOS bit, the interfaces, that is where we had to modify in the engine bit. And again, it used to be something very specific owing to, say, when Unreal, we were working with 4.26. So when 4.26 came out, at that point of time, what was the OS version that was there? What was the minimum API level that was required? So the engine was, I mean, the engine source was built according to that. So when that keeps modifying, You just have to keep a track of what has been modified since maybe 4.26 was released, and what has been modified from the iOS side and from the Android side. And those were most of the things that we had to do specifically for the mobile version.
Also, would you ever consider using your own in-house engine against Unreal?
Well, I mean, it's Unreal, at least for us, it has been working wonders for a small team. You don't have to go ahead reinventing the wheel. They have done a pretty darn solid job. So in-house engine, I mean, this is again my personal opinion that if you are an enthusiast, of course, go ahead with it. It depends on what you really want out of it, your vision. If your vision is to create an in-house engine for the studio and then take it forward, for sure. Our vision was to create, to build this solid video game, and we did not want to go down the route of reinventing the wheel. And yeah, that's, I think, one of the reasons.
Thank you.
Just a very small update about, not this question, but the one just before, about how to update like all the SDKs and everything within Unreal when using older engine versions, which is like exactly what you had to face with like a game released in 2020 that you then have to release again to other platforms 3 years later. So this is extremely painful for Unreal developers, but please know that it's actually very painful for Epic too, because we don't really make the guidelines, right? We are really dependent on what Google and Apple are pushing through. So best advice would be update your engine, but like let's say in your case, obviously this was not an option because the game was already released and stable. This would have made no sense. So actually you did what was the best way of doing it. And it's painful, but cherry picking through the SDK updates, we are pushing to new releases and then integrating into older Unreal Engine versions is, to my knowledge, the less painful way of doing it. And what I can say is, like, if you have perforce access, actually we do have a stream we call 427 plus, that we do not have any new feature. We do not have any of the brand new, shiny Unreal 5 stuff, but we are doing all the SDK updates, so you can probably merge them back easier from a 427 to a 426 than, let's say, a 5.3 to a 426, right? So there's this. And if you don't have perforce access, I would heavily use GitHub, and actually the search tool within GitHub when doing a Engine source code search. Just look at, let's say you want to do the Xcode update, just look for Xcode within GitHub and just get the 10 last updates and cherry pick what you want to do and merge them back to your engine. We understand this is painful, but please know this is also painful for us.
Yeah, this is something that we did as well. Thank you for picking up on that. That we would go ahead and download the latest version of the engine or go to the source code, the source control, and just compare the problematic parts of the code. And just, as you said, cherry pick the things that we realize, okay, this is something that has been updated and it would resolve something. And yeah, I feel your pain as well.
Yeah.
Can we play this game in multiplayer?
No, this game was intended to be a single-player game, which focused very much on the story that we wanted to tell, and it's available only in single-player mode.
Okay. My suggestion is to get an update, like we can play with friends, all those, online.
Well, you can definitely play, and your friends can, like, boost your morale. I mean, we have we have people playing. Rather, we have. I mean, the kind of game that we have made, the kind of story that we want to tell. We have seen people, kids playing with their parents, this particular game with their parents. It's a sibling story. So we have had a brother and a sister also coming up to our booth. This was in one of the previous editions of IGDC itself. So we have seen, I mean, it's not exactly multiplayer, but we have seen people play this game with their family members who would otherwise not pick up a video game, not pick up a video game console or PC. And we have had many stories, people messaging us. That has been really heartening for us to see.
Hi Paras, Kanish this side. First of all, thank you so much for this talk. And I just have a doubt, like question thing, that was there any specific reason of not using anim dynamics for the clothes instead of going with the encloth thing?
Yeah, anim dynamics is something that we explored very early in development, like when we were doing the PC console versions. But anim dynamics, they work better on chain-like objects, I would say. And for a closed cloth like a ghagra, anim dynamics is, again, we tried it out, but it wasn't giving us that kind of fidelity that we wanted. And eventually at that time, Apex was working well for us and gave us much better result than anim dynamics, specifically for the clothing system.
And for the mobile system, like, is it optimized well, or was there optimization issue also that you are not using it?
Anim dynamics specifically?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because anim dynamics is something that we tried out and discarded for the cloth very early in development, during the development for the PC consoles versions as well. So we did not test it out as much for mobile either.
And just another question, that was there any specific like custom tool built in the whole pipeline to make it more easier or something?
More easier for?
For the developers or for the artists?
I mean, there were no custom tools specifically. Of course, we made certain tools for the original game. We made foliage spawning volumes, some things that would help ease or speed up rather the work of the artists. But there was no tool developed specifically for the pipeline. I mean, the pipelines themselves, we rather focused on the processes, make the processes as efficient as possible based on the tools that we already have. Because again, considering the size of the team, we did not want to go down the rabbit hole of optimizing the process so much that we end up forgetting about the actual development itself. So it was like a very fine line that we had to tread. So we focused more on the processes, we focused more on fine-tuning a process based on the tools we already had.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hi.
So you said that this game is inspired from other. Sorry. Hello. So you said this Raji game is inspired from other games like Genshin Impact and other two games. And when I first heard about Raji, I was addictively playing Genshin Impact. So I was excited. Let's play, let's see what this game is about. And I really like the concept. I want it to become more successful. But my question is, what is the USP of this game, and how you are planning to create a loyal gamer base for this, like gamer community for it? And I heard that sequels are going to be released of this game, right?
Where did you hear that from?
I'm not sure. I mean, the story is not completed in the first part, so there must be second and third part.
Yeah, that's a valid assumption. Yeah, the first thing that you said about the games that we played. So the games Genshin Impact for specifically, we played that mostly to get a feel of the UI and UX, because it has been done brilliantly in that game, and we were starting from zero, so that seemed like a logical choice. And talking about the USP and creating a fan base, the USP, it's something that I think it built up organically. I would say it's two things mainly. One is that we really wanted to get inspired from the stories that we have heard growing up as kids, and the epics that we have in our Hindu culture. And that's something that I feel that resonated with the audience when they first saw the visuals, when they first saw how true we want to stay true to those storytelling elements. And secondly, right off the bat when we started development, the most experienced department in our studio was the art department. And that is something that shows in the final product as well, and people really were hooked to the visuals as well. And I think that kind of naturally flowed into a lot of people following Raji and actually being curious about what we are up to next.
Very interesting. Is it most of them coming from Indian origin, or are you getting it from out? Any demographics percentage?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
When you mentioned about the percentage of people resonating with the content of Indian origin and international, do you have any data metrics that you can share?
I'm afraid I don't have any data metrics on me at the moment, and I never do.
It's a great adventure, you trying with Indian content and being successful, and to inspire people here. Is there anything that, how do they take the content and approach the market, could be of a great help. But anyway, it's really nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So here like it's released in consoles and like mobiles. So like it should be better to keep the project separate during the build in releasing in consoles and in mobile.
That's
or like keep the same project.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would share some insights on that of what we did. Again, this worked out well for us. So what we did was, initially when it was supposed to be for PC and PlayStation and Xbox, for those we had a single project. And then for Switch, since we knew we had to optimize it quite heavily, what we did was in the content folder, most of the things, they were being shared. We set up the version control, we set up our subversion, our SVN in such a way that some of the folders, like the texture folders and the VFX folders, which need a lot of optimization, they were kept independent of each other. And the rest of the folders and the source code, that was being shared. And the same was the case with mobile, where we kept the textures folder in the content directory separate, and the rest of it was being shared. So if you're using any kind of version control, it'll go a long way if you're working with multiple platforms. So what we did was we had a master, a master project, and then for the other projects, say for the Switch project, we would have, there is something in SVN called externals. We use that, and that way we could share most part of the project, and the things that we had to keep independent, like the textures and VFX, they were independently done.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, if there are any more questions, we are out there on the far right. If you guys want to play the game, check it out, or just have a conversation, you are most welcome to do so. Thank you so much.